So shelter number 3. I don't know if I'm going to get it finished today. The shadows are getting a wee bit long. But I thought, rather than just build this one, a wee bit of history. So if we think about the indigenous peoples, like we call this a primitive shelter, they would call this home. And there's a movie, it's called Black Robe, and it takes place in Champlain's era in the 1600s in New France. And it shows the Huron Indians taking the Jesuits into Huronia area. And it depicts it very well because they're putting up their shelters every night as they progress. And it shows the women on the portages carrying bundles of birch bark shingles. So, you know, into the 1700s, they had canvas, old sails, what have you. And there's lots of paintings and pictures when we get into the 1800s that depict that. But in the 1600s, they used their traditional bark. So traditionally in the summer, woodland Indians that were hunter-gatherers lived in wigwams. The agrarian ones, like the Iroquois, the Huron, they lived in longhouses. But when let's say the Cree or the Algonquin, the Montagnais, when summer was nearing an end, they had to depart and break up into smaller family units because the area wouldn't support large numbers. So they would take the bark off their dome wigwams, they would head into their winter hunting ground, and they would erect teepee-style structures. Now they'd be a lot larger than this. This is just going to be for my solo shelter. They would build one big enough for a family. Then they would cover it with the birch bark. In the spring, they'd take off what birch bark was still usable, go back to their wigwam frame, which was left in the spring, and recover it. Anyway, I gotta go bring in my bundles, and I'm gonna see if I can do a traditional bark covered teepee. So the only thing I'm using here, other than what the forest provides, is I brought my 20-foot tump line, which I always have. That's sort of been my centerpiece, kind of giving me some structural integrity. And I always have my snare wire in the winter. So I'm going to use a bit of snare wire so that I get an overlapping shingle effect. I put a few branches on the outside of this in case the wind picks up, bring in my firewood, and I'm good to go. Oh, this morning I was going to gather elm bark, which was a typical bark used by the natives, and started to gather it this morning, and I couldn't really find big enough trees, and then I did find some big enough trees, but it was going to add another day to my build because it was quite a trek from here to get the bark. So I decided to use some bark that we had left over from poor bark, really, from birch bark canoe builds and stuff like that. So, and it won't get wasted. It gets used for this. It'll get used for quivers, baskets, all kinds of application for birch bark.